Let's do that.
All right, Chris, since we have quorum, should we get started?
Yep, I believe we can go ahead and get started.
Excellent. I would like to call the meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance and the Goethe Pledge. Please stand, place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the Goethe Pledge, Casey and Vicky.
As a citizen of the world, I will follow Goethe's circle of learning. Curiosity opens my mind, ideas lead to knowledge, responsible choices show respect, cooperation strengthens others, learners are courageous.
Chris, what are you doing? I can't read it now.
I'm sorry.
Ein Bürger dieser Welt folge ich dem Kreis des Lernens. Neugierig, ideenreich. What's next, Casey?
Respectful,
Respektvoll, kooperativ, mutig, empathisch.
Thank you.
My apologies.
All right, let's move on to roll call. Sam.
Present.
Pete.
Here.
Katrin.
Here.
And at this moment, Frank is not here. He may be joining later. I'd like to make a motion to affirm the board findings pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E. Is there a second?
Second. Okay.
I'll get that one to Sam. All in favor? Sam?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Moving on to consent, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Sorry, it's not consent. Is there a second?
I'll second.
From Sam. All in favor? Sam?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
All right. Moving on to public comment. Go ahead, Casey.
the public may comment on any item that is on the agenda or any other item that is in the board's jurisdiction. Members of the public who wish to comment during the board meeting may use the raise hand tool on the Zoom platform. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and the total time for this purpose shall not exceed 30 minutes per meeting. If an interpreter is needed for comments, they will be translated to English, and the time limit shall be 6 minutes. Individuals may speak 1 time per subject. The Board of Trustees reserves the right to mute or remove a member of the public if comments or actions disrupt the board meeting. Board members are prohibited from responding to or commenting on matters raised by the public that are not on the agenda. And it looks like we have no public comment at this time.
Thank you, Casey. Moving on to consent, I'd like to make a motion to approve the regular board meeting minutes of October 17th. All in favor? Sam?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
I was absent last time, so I can't tell. So if you don't mind, I will abstain from that.
I was absent as well, but I will vote an aye since the other board members who are present agree.
I trust the other board members as well. So if you don't mind, I will change it to a yes.
Perfect. All right. All for a aye.
Mhm.
All right. Chris, ED report. Go for it.
Okay. All right. As usual, we start things off with enrollment, and we're basically at the same spot we were a month ago. If you recall, we had dipped down to 391, and we're as of Friday, we're at 394, same as last month. The one thing about enrollment, though, that I do want to share, and it's not particularly great news, is that we had talked about the local recruiting events that were happening, and we were out, soliciting intent to enroll forms and out talking to people and handing out pamphlets, and had several different events that were happening in the area. And they were truly sparsely attended. And this wasn't, particular to like our booth. It was across the board. There does not seem to be the number of families out looking for schools as there had been in previous years. So it's a bit of a different playing field that is continuing the trend we saw this year, particularly at kindergarten, where our numbers did not pan out. So it's something we need to be obviously watching and trying to pinpoint folks, and really, I think it's really going to be also a part of in the next phase of enrolling for next year, of really working closely with families and reaching out consistently during the time between the lottery and enrollment in school starting in August. So where do we stand? We did gain and lose a few students, just a couple, but they're you can see where we have our classes. The largest class we have classes of 26, and that's at third grade. And our smallest class is the 7th grade with 19. But you can see, we're basically most of our classes are around, the average is about 23. And so that's where we stand with enrollment. I did want to give a Prop 39 and facilities update. Where we had left off last month is we were preparing our November 1 application that has been submitted. We worked with YMC, and a really big thank you to Biggie for the work that went behind a lot of the calculations and the preparations that went into that. We submitted, and it really looked a lot, in terms of the numbers, it looked a lot like the previous year, at the application from the previous year, where we did receive a December letter. We have over the past 2 years. We do expect to see another December 1 letter. That's the one that comes from LA Unified, where they say we don't agree or questions the numbers that we have, and then we need to respond to that by January. So what we put into the application is we put in that we're planning for where we stand right now, which is the 1 full TK class and 2 full kindergarten classes. At the moment, we have one full TK class and 2 filled, but not only 19 kids in each of those classes of kindergarten. And so we're planning for that for next year, to be able to fill those. We do have a larger TK group rolling forward, so it should be easier to fill those. But we did not see the number of kids to be able to justify a 3rd kindergarten, which we hope to see at one point, but right now the numbers are just not there to justify it. We are planning for our 2 6th grade and 2 7th grade classes. If you recall, our 6th grade, we currently have 2 classes, so we want that and expect that to roll forward to 7th grade. And we would also like to, are planning to fill 2 6th grade classes again next year. We have a little smaller of a 5th grade that would roll into it. So it would require, certainly that there would be students from outside. But this past year, we did have quite a number of students who came to us from the outside, and we have indications that we'll be able to do that again. So that's where our expectation for the application that was put in for November 1st is. and we also expect to be kind of following the same pattern of going and asking for a alternative agreement that will allow us to capture a few more rooms than we are offered. So pretty much on the same pattern as we saw last year. Any questions about enrollment or Prop 39?
Sam,
No questions.
No questions.
Katrin?
No questions.
All right, Chris, go ahead.
Okay. Then the main part of the presentation from me tonight is about our Goethe exclusive student achievement measures. And this is something that we've wanted to create a consistent system or format for the board to be able to know, is the ship going in the right direction, and do we need to make some adjustments but this is high level information and data that we're looking at. So it's not, granular down to the ground information. It's are we going in the right direction? And I appreciate spent a little time with Pete digging through some of the options that we have of how to present some of this data. A lot of it is taken from the Unified Insights program. We're trying to have a way for the board to have something consistent and can be expected, that this is what you'll get at this time of the year. And so what we're looking at is a twice annual review. And that review, let me switch here, would be in the fall and in the spring. And so this would be the one we're looking at today, is what we would be looking at in the fall. So I'm going to ask the board to be thinking about format, and also I'll go through the data and information that's there. This was available in your Dropbox folders for taking a look at. So as I said, this is the high level data that it'll include some demographic information, some grade distributions. At this point, we have the MYP grade distribution, so how students are doing on teacher grades. We have our iReady, which is our local achievement measure. We have LPAC, which is our English learner measure, and we have kind of the big one, the annual CASP test. So I know last month we spent a little bit of time going over CASP, but I want to put it into the format that I think we'll be using moving forward, and keeping in mind that even though this is a test that comes once a year, so the fall is when it's going to be, I think, most important for the board to look at CASP. It's also important that it's side by side and seen along with the spring information, where iReady sort of takes precedence. So we'll talk about that as we go through. I think in terms of process, I'd like to be able to go through this PowerPoint, and then at the end, go ahead and take questions from there. So I'm going to hit all the different parts and go through it, and then I'll take questions at the end, if that's okay. So let's start with our student demographics. Where do we stand with our total number of students at 394? And we have about 8% that are special education. We have about 14% that are English language learners. So those are two important benchmark or groups that we need to be aware of how many kids we have. In terms of ethnicity, we stand at about 25% Hispanic, 11.7% Black or African American, 40% white, 6.8% Asian, and 15.2% multiple ethnicities. But overall, those numbers have stayed pretty consistent over the past few years. So we know demographically who we are, but let's take a look at, actually, I think I'll enlarge this just a bit. There we go. This gives you an idea of where our students, this is a heat map of where our students, our families live. And it gives us an idea, if you kind of zone into the area. So our school is basically right here. You can see where LAX is. And you can see that it's the LA Unified portions that are in this area, Delray, Mar Vista, Venice. Not as much, and where you see green means there might be a few families, but not an intense group. So Santa Monica, we do have kids from there, but not large numbers. Culver City, we do have students, and Culver City is a tough one because it's got the weird shape of a city, and whether it's students who are in LA Unified just outside of the city of Culver City, or whether there's some kids who are coming from Culver City as well, Culver City Unified. Another interesting kind of running along the 90 freeway and across the 405 here, we can see we have a large group of students who are coming from Ladera Heights and kind of all the way across, both Inglewood adjacent and from within Inglewood as well. And Inglewood is our largest out of district sender to us. So that's kind of how it plays out. We do have small numbers that come from, I'll scroll a little bit more, that come from South Bay and the areas around there, Gardena and the LA Unified areas that are in the South Bay. We do have a group that come from there as well. But it's an interesting map, and wanted to share that with the board as part of the presentation. So shifting gears, I mentioned that grades, or a grade distribution, is something that is I think important for the board to at least be keeping cognizant of. And there's kind of some interesting information. This is all we have at this point is just the MYP distribution of grades, because those grades were put in an A through F format, and we were able to extract those fairly readily. But the PYP, where we're trying to extract very specific things about IB, that's still a work in progress. We don't have that a completed version, but that's intended to get there. Hopefully by spring you'll see that an MYP PYP version of a grade distribution. But I think this is kind of an interesting one, because this is 3 years in a row, 3 years running, and it's all grades that were given of any sort. So it does include math and science and language arts, social studies grades, but it also includes advisory classes. It includes exploratory classes. So it's all grades that were given. But you can see in 2021, 2020 and 2021, that was the year we were not on campus. This is the year we spent almost the entire year as a online program. And you can see there's a dramatic difference in how our students were doing, particularly when we look at this lower end of F's and D's, 18% and 12%. So that means 30% of our grades, the grades the kids were getting, were D's and F's during that time. So that's a pretty alarming number. But it was a fairly alarming time. So in looking at where do we stand now, last year things shifted pretty dramatically from that as we came back to campus, and things looks like have settled even more for this year as we're looking at current grades, and that's only partially through the year, but it does give you an idea of how students are doing. And I think overall the numbers that we're looking at here are pretty okay place to be in terms of grades. We don't expect all students to be getting all A's all the time, and then we worry about grade inflation. But the numbers that we're looking at here seem to indicate our kids right now are on a fairly even keel in terms of performance in middle school grades. The shift or the focus in the fall is going to be on our CASP scores, the statewide test that was taken at the end of last year and that we just got the results for statewide. But an important piece is our ongoing testing, which is iReady. And so I want to take a moment to look at what will be really an important slide come the spring. This is looking at just our fall. So you see the F there for fall. Missing, of course, is winter because we haven't taken that yet, or spring. Winter we take in December, January, and in spring we take in March. So that information will be here when we come back and look at this information for the spring, which plan to do in April. The results that are here, keeping in mind this is the starting point of the year. This is where kids began the year for us. But what do these numbers really mean, and are they something that should be alarming or should be, oh, this is great? Where does that stand? I think it's important that we look at, and this is the reading scores, that we look at what happened a year ago. So this is taking a look at a year ago in the fall, 2021-22, and where our numbers were at. And it's pretty similar. We had a few more of the at risk from 16 to 19 in that spot. So students are starting out maybe just a little bit at a lower spot in reading. But again, this is the beginning of the year, not where we want to get them by the end of the year. But just for comparison, that we're doing a fall to fall understanding, I think we're in a similar spot to where we were a year ago. We can also take a look at this by grade level and seeing how students do in different grade levels and where they're doing better or worse, and is it a cohort of kids that year, and tracking that as well. Those are the ELA reading scores. Math, we want to look at the similar information and see where we are at the start of the year. We'd want to look at the comparison, and with math, actually, it looked like we did a little better. The number of students who were at risk a year ago, 19%. The number of students at risk right now, 17%. But not a huge difference. You can see these look similar. So I think that tells us that we're at a spot at the beginning of the year where there's not alarm bells either way. That kids are doing extraordinarily well or kids are doing extraordinarily poorly. I think it's about in the spot we'd be looking for. And again, with math, there are some overall scores by grade level. So what stands out in terms of iReady? First of all, these fall results are simply the beginning point for the start of the year. So iReady is going to be more important in the spring, and that's why we want to do this 2 times a year to be able to look and compare while it's relatively fresh, and using same format so that we can go back and say, okay, that's comparable. The iReady scores, as I just mentioned, are consistent between the fall scores of last year and this year. They were maybe a touch lower in reading and a touch higher in math, but overall pretty much comparable. And the kindergarten and first grade kind of logically fall here. At kindergarten, you can't have anybody in the red because you can't be multiple grades behind in kindergarten. But very few kindergarten students are at a point where they're on level of kindergarten when they start out. So that's not unusual. And at first grade, it's still not unusual there that we have a very large yellow area. Now, what was interesting is that MYP in math has a larger green and larger red. You can see that the green increases kind of as the grade levels go along. It's not a direct line, but you can see that that's the case. But we also see that a little bit here in the red, that it gets a little larger. So the yellow is what seems to be a smaller amount. So I think it's just something we'll need to keep track of as we look at the winter scores and we look at the spring scores. But I found that it was kind of interesting, and we don't see that when we look at the reading scores. It's a little more flat across the green here and a little more flat across the red. So I'm not sure what exactly to make of that, but again, we should keep an eye on that moving ahead in the spring. There were also similar percentages in red across the grade levels for both reading and math, but they weren't necessarily the same students. So what I mean by that is the red levels were pretty consistent if you just compare the red across the grade levels. But obviously we're not showing student names here, but we did have taken a look, and there are some students who are in both, but in more cases, it's a different subset of students who are struggling in math and a different subset of students studying and reading. So that gives us, what do we do then with intervention and the intervention work that we do during the school day, and how do we target those kids? That has implications there. So iReady, as I said, it is the really the spring that's going to be the closer analysis on that. LPAC, the information that's there for our English learners, and this is looking at the summative performance on the LPAC. So this is the overall summative. So it's not looking at the subset groups of that test, but it does give us a kind of a 30,000 foot view of how are our kids doing. And basically looking at those numbers, 89% of the learners are moderately developed or well developed, which are the top two categories. And if you look, that is up from 82%. So if you're looking at these top two categories, went from 82% here to 87% there. So a little bit of improvement from 2020-21 to 2021-22, which is the most recent tests we have. In the spring, we should be able to see the newer summative tests that will have been given by then. In the same way, the bottom two areas, we had a drop, which is what we'd want to see. It decreased from 18% to 11% in the bottom two categories, which are minimally developed or somewhat developed. And you can see that right here at the bottom there, that it got a little bit smaller. The big thing that we need to look at in the fall is the CASP test. And so I'll spend the remaining time kind of looking at that. And the we'll start with reading. And we did share this last month, but for a couple folks who weren't here, some pretty important results. Mainly that the big picture is our results actually went up 2% in both reading and math, whereas most of the state went down by multiple 2, 3, 4, 5% points down in terms of proficiency levels. The information that we want to share repeatedly with the board is the proficiency rates. We don't have proficiency rates for 2018-19 in grades 6, 7, and 8 because we didn't have 6th, 7th, or 8th graders at that time, but you can see the rate by grade for reading that goes across that, and I think that's an important thing for us to look at. Probably even more important is our ethnicity rates and seeing where there was improvement, but even where improvement exists, are there still gaps? That certainly would be the case with our Black or African American students. We had a pretty significant improvement level. And it's tough, comparing this from 3 years ago to now. It's not a apples to apples kind of thing, but it does give us a sense of where things are at. That's a pretty major jump, 29% proficiency rate to 46% proficiency rate. And all the other proficiency rates went up, other than a slight drop here with multi, but it's at the pretty high end. The one that's more concerning is our Hispanic Latino, because we see that in reading, and later we'll see that also in math. So that's something we really have to be keeping an eye on. Speaking of math, just taking a look at where we have moved from. So a little shift to about 2 percentage points to the good between 2018-19 and 2021-22. Again, that rate by grade is something we want to have the board be cognizant of and looking at that over time. And our students by ethnicity, sorry, whoops, I clicked on the wrong one. There we go. I think I was looking at, so mathematics, that's the one I had. Make sure I was on the right one. And mathematics by ethnicity. We did have a drop in our Asian students with mathematics. That's a very small N number. But something we should be keeping an eye on because that was fairly significant. We did have an increase again with our Black and African American students, but given that this is a pretty big gap compared to where our other students are showing proficiency, definitely something we need to be watching. And again, that area of Hispanic Latino, that about 10% drop we saw in both reading and in math. For our students with multiple ethnicities in math, a pretty big jump. So that was kind of interesting because reading was a bit of a drop, but a pretty big jump here. So just to keep us online, and Pete, yes, I did draw the line in for you on this one. What this is, ideally, we'd want to see everybody out at the area where you see the number 73, and that's the number of students who took the test. But what that is saying is they did well, that group of students did well in both reading, which is on the vertical axis, and mathematics, which is on the horizontal. And so you can see that that's a fairly large group, and that is our white students. We also have our multiple ethnicity students who are pretty much in that spot. I mentioned the Asian students, which is a very small, barely can see their bubble there. And you can see at our smaller group at 24 students, our Black African American students that are doing better in reading than in math. So it's just a different way of looking at that same information. And the more balanced Hispanic and Latino, but again, we see gaps. We want to get everybody up to the spot where we're at, 80% or so proficiency or better. So a couple of things to be thinking about with the CASP. First of all, it was the first time we've taken the test since 2018-19. So our kids, in many cases, had never taken the test before. The test was administered in May, and it was during a COVID spike. It was not exactly our, the finest time to be giving a high stakes test. Our overall scores did go up in both math, which that number is about 66%, and reading at about 69%. So mentioned the growth in Black African American reading and math scores. Reading far better, but is still a gap and something we need to be working to close, as well as a drop in Hispanic and Latino students in both math and reading, and that's one we have to look. We also want to, and Frank's not here, but he asks every time about, well, where does this put us in comparison to our other local schools? And so I'm going to get to that in just a moment. But first, I'd like to kind of address one of the things that I think Pete's brought up, which was, is there any indication that iReady is telling us how our kids are going to do on the CASP? And this is not a a perfect student for student or apples to apples thing, but it does give a broad sense of where things stand. So I put on the left hand side, this is a comparison of iReady, the test that the kids took last March, and that we get results for, and gives us a few month and a half before May testing of the CASP. And we can see the results on the right and this is for reading. So one is iReady on the left for reading, and one is CASP on the right for reading. And in March, 69% of our students were in the green tier. And that, keeping in mind, that's all of our students, because we all take it kindergarten through 8th grade. But all of our students, that number was 69%. Interestingly, in the CASP, when they took it in May, 69% met or exceeded standards on the CASP in reading. Now, obviously, like I said, this isn't a student for student comparison. I was surprised that the number came out to the number, but I think it does give us an indication that information we get in March can be helpful to us in preparing for CASP tests. In other words, if a student or a group of students is having struggles in a particular area, and we can drill down to those areas, we can try to affect a change and support that student and get them ready. So this was the reading one. The other one I'd like to share is math. and I was surprised yet again that the number was exactly the same number. In March, our kindergarten through 8th grade took the test, and 66% of them fell into the green tier. And our 3rd through 8th graders took the math CASP in May, and 66% of them met or exceeded standards on the CASP, which is basically one of the main measures that the state uses. It's kind of the quick and dirty, easy one for people to understand and grasp. Are you in the top 2 tiers? Are kids meeting or exceeding standards? So that gives us, I think, a sense that in both reading and math, the iReady is giving us some very useful information. I don't want to say it's exact, because it's not the exact same students. They have different. I mean, we had a subset who didn't take the CASP, but I think it does give us a pretty good sense that iReady's on the right track, and we have good information to use in March and April in preparation for May. The other thing last thing I wanted to share was the what I mentioned about let me see here. I mentioned about Frank and an interest in, let's see, other schools in our area. So I prepared this for the board. It's in the Dropbox. It gives us a sense of what's happening in the state of California with math and English language arts, and taking a look at not all, but quite a number of West Side schools. We ranked these by math and where we are, so that you can see in comparison to the state, well above where the state is in math, and well above where the state is in language arts. It also gives a sense of, these are both district schools. Some are from other school districts. If they were part of LA Unified, either charter or a district school, it says LA Unified on it. And you can get a sense of where we fall. It's different with math versus language arts, and some schools have higher on one and lower in another, but you can get a sense of where are we falling, and I think it compares pretty favorably, and I don't think I know we're not where we want to be yet, but I think that there has been some struggles. I think a lot of folks did go down, and we kind of held on. I'm going to scroll a little bit. You can see where we're at, and the numbers that go all the way down to the bottom.
Chris, sorry. So you're using an average, right, between the two?
I'm sorry. No, these are. I'm sorry. It's a
for the ranking that you're doing right now.
The ranking is simply in order. We did it by math, so it's sorted by math. So we just took the math. Could have done the same thing with ELA. So yeah, it just, that's the sorting. So no, it's
Are you wrapping up? I have a few questions.
I am doing that, and that gives us a sense of what I'd like to share each in the fall and in the spring. The fall, the big ticket item is iReady, and in the spring, the big ticket item is CASP.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'm going to hand it off to everyone else. The only comment I have is on this slide from a competitive analysis standpoint. I'm sorry, you're not slide, the the chart you had, that one.
Yep.
Yes. If you could just put that on a chart that had everyone else and then highlight it out, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
That had every,
Like, I don't know, not everyone, not like 50 of them, but like, I don't know, 10 or 10 of the regional ones in our area, our major competitors.
all of them are
highlight-
on here. I don't know of any competitor we don't have that's not on this list.
No, I know. But I mean, like, I don't know, pick 10, there's, I don't know, how many are there? 40, 30, something on that list. But I would
Oh.
just take 10 of our major competitors, you know, the ones that are making our attendees, put it on a line chart, you know what I mean, and highlight it. But I love it. Thank you. I'll stop talking. Sam?
Got it.
Thanks. So on this one, I think one of the things that would be helpful to me on the comparative ranking that's up would be to maybe separate out between the middle schools and the elementary schools. And I don't know if you have the ability to separate out our middle school CASP from our PYP CASP scores to see them on there. But you know, on the whole, you know, it's a really impressive number to see here, right? I think that this tells the story in a different way from the report. On the report side, you know, in terms of the format, it makes sense to me. I think it's a really usable format. And I particularly, you know, like this kind of side by side that you're on right now, the iReady telling the story of what might happen on the CASP. And then, you know, just the follow-up from that is, you know, given what you've learned from this, from the correlation that could be read from this, will you be planning on doing interventions targeted after the March iReady to prepare the students for the May CASP this coming year, you know, taking the learning from this?
A great question, and the answer is yes, and it's not going to wait till March. So we're already using this information to guide the intervention that is already happening during the day. So it's already underway, but I think from our teachers, what they had a chance in staff meeting 2 weeks ago, I think, to dive in to their own data and take a look at all the different pieces so that they can see how their kids in their classes are specifically doing and take some time with that. So that's definitely an ongoing piece. But in terms of specific intervention, that where students are receiving support in kind of a pull-out fashion with our intervention teacher, that already is happening.
Great, thanks. No further questions. Is here if you're talking, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I was talking. Yeah, Pete, go for it.
Thanks. So yeah, I think overall it looks good. Particularly with I think what would be interesting with this slide is a couple of things. One, I think the iReady portion of it should only be in the comparable grades, so you should exclude K2. Or you could do another one that excludes K2 because those are the grades that will have aligned data. And I think what would be really interesting, especially as you move forward, is, you know, obviously going backwards makes no sense because of all the disruptions and everything. But I think what would be interesting, maybe as a first cut next time, is expanding out the tier 2 and just taking the tier 2 kids and then doing the column chart for CASP to see where they end up. Right. So if all the yellow kids end up in yellow, then that really isn't that helpful for them. But if we could see some movement among those yellow kids, and I guess they must all be the Simpsons or something, but But if we could see some movement there, I think this would be really useful to see that, the interventions are actually having some impact or not. So that would be the two things I would suggest for this going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Catherine?
Thank you. This is all very interesting. And aside from what my colleagues already have mentioned, I also found the geomapping exercise interesting that you have done, just looking at student locations. And I was surprised how far sort of into more like the east side of LA our student population goes. That is definitely more distributed than I anticipated. And I think that should surely inform decisions or sort of thoughts on perhaps future locations of the school as well. Definitely more distributed than I thought. And I also want to echo what Yasir said earlier about the rankings. I was very surprised when I read that earlier today. And I almost feel like this should be front and center of our marketing. I know we don't really do competitive marketing, but we could, and it would look really good. And I'm wondering what ideas we have to use this data, perhaps in conversations with current parents, or to show how well we do. I know several families who moved their kids to schools on this list, thinking that they would get better education there. And looking at the numbers, it really is not the case.
Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. All right, Chris, that was really good. And you said twice a year, is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Can't do it every week?
Yeah, it might be October instead of November, now that we kind of know the format, and assuming the state, it won't be an election year, so maybe the state will give us the results. Good
zing.
But yeah, I'm thinking like October and April.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you, Chris. We look forward to it.
Okay.
Moving on. Allison is here from the GPA. How's it going, Allison? You want to take center stage here?
Okay, center stage, huh? All right, cool. Let's see. There we go. Hey, everyone. So I'm here just to give an update on what we've been up to in the GPA over the past several months, actually this fall, and happy to answer any questions that folks have. At the onset of the school year, we hosted a number of meet and greet events for new and returning families. These were great events in person at local parks. We also hosted several uniform swaps so that families who needed uniforms could get a hold of those, and families who had things that their children had outgrown could pass them on. We assisted with the Shine the School event at the start of the school year. We helped to host multiple cafes, the first of which was designated to raise funds specifically to support GPA events. So that was a really great win for us, and it was a very successful cafe. The second cafe was held recently and raised funds specifically to support Garden. So those are going to be shared throughout the school. And then the next cafe will be happening at Jogathon tomorrow and supporting fifth grade and also middle school classrooms and some of their activities. We had an amazing second annual Family Fun Day at Burton Chase Park, which got rescheduled due to a rare rainstorm in Los Angeles. And so we hosted it in October, and it was again a big hit. We're thinking that maybe October is the sweet spot for that event because it was lovely weather, beautiful location at Burton Chase Park in the marina, and families really enjoyed the event. We got nothing but positive feedback. This past week was Lantern Fest, which was on campus again. Everyone was really happy to have that event on campus. I know we coordinated a number of volunteers to string the lights, serve cookies, warm beverages, and it was a big hit. We've also hosted several successful cultural events for students at the school, and I'm really happy that we're having those in person again in the auditorium. Allison Horn is our GPA cultural coordinator, and she coordinated fantastic events for Hispanic Heritage Month and also Native American, I don't know if it's History Month or Cultural Awareness Month, but regardless, great events for both and super feedback from teachers and students. currently we're working to plan for the holidays and having, some treats and gifts for our teachers and staff, and working on some plans to spend some of the funds that we've raised on some beautification efforts. So specifically, we want to kind of build on the beautification that's been going on campus with the plants and the painting. And we are hoping to hang beautiful banners, similar to what some of the other charter schools have been doing on our less than beautiful chain link fencing. And so that's about what I have for the moment. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Allison. Sam?
No questions, just a word of thanks. And I've been to many of the events, and the GPA is really doing a great job this year in supporting getting people back together. So it's been a really enjoyable from the parent aspect.
Pete?
No questions. Thank you.
Katrin?
Fully agree with Sam. The Lantern Fest was wonderful. I was so surprised seeing how beautiful the school looked with the twinkly lights. Good job.
If only
Thank
our twinkly lights all the time.
Well,
My
thank you,
son
Allison.
literally asked that. Can they keep that?
They can keep the memory. All right. Well, thanks everyone for all the great work that you do to support our school and our students and our families. And happy to answer questions if they come up.
Thank you, Allison.
All right.
All right, Chris, moving on. I'd like to make a motion to approve the financials for October 2022. Is there a second?
I can second.
From Sam. Go ahead, Chris.
All right, moving to finance. Let me open this up so we have something to talk about. Financials. So we've mentioned at meeting after meeting, this year has been a very odd year in that what we had approved and had expected in June didn't happen the way it said it was going to come July when the budget was actually passed at the state level. The good news is most of it's really information or information to the good. So it really covered us because the one information that we had to the bad was enrollment, where we had initially had budgeted for 426 students, and that number came in at 391. As you mentioned, it is at 394. But we basically we're going to be presenting in a little bit a budget adjustment that uses that 391 number as the moving forward number for the remaining of the year, and putting in all the other adjustments that have happened and additional money that's come in. I've made about the past 3 months have gone through what those changes have been, and we'll finalize that today and present it. And it ties in with the October dashboard, which is of course an important dashboard because it is also it ties to the first interim report, and that also is on the agenda today. So to walk us through it, I'm going to ask. I believe Ryan is here. Ryan, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'll ask you to kind of walk us through, and I can just tell me where to scroll.
Okay. Hello, everyone. These are, like Dr. Jones said, our October 2022 financials, which are significant because they are also our LAUSD first interim financials. And these are the numbers that will be reported to LAUSD in the reporting that is due this week. This presentation has actual enrollment data through month 2, and I just wanted to highlight month 2 because I have 393 students as of month 2. Dr. Jones in his presentation mentioned that number is now 394. But this presentation had 393 students through month 2. at an average daily attendance rate of just under 96%. So we're right on track almost with our budget. And there's even some opportunity, I think, to capture, additional perhaps with independent study, right, Dr. Jones?
Yeah, that's an ongoing activity.
Okay. So that's the enrollment piece. As Dr. Jones mentioned, there has been a lot of swings in funding, some for the good, some for the bad. You'll notice that our local control funding formula is under by about $203,000. That would be under by a lot more if the LCFF rates did not increase. So we received some cushion there. On the federal revenue side, we have about $32K less. That's also tied to funding, with the majority of it tied to our federal portion of special education funds, which is a product of total enrollments. Now, on the state revenue side, we have a huge upswing in revenue, and that is broken down between three main components, none of which were budgeted for, as you can see. The largest portion being Section 123 hold harmless funding, and that's one-time funding that we're being provided this year to make up for revenue loss in the previous year, tied to pains with the post-pandemic school life where students are quarantining and missing school. So those $290,000 are meant to make us whole, and that is not an ongoing funding source. It's a one-time funding source. The other two components are discretionary block grants. You can see the Learning Recovery Block Grant, this school is estimated to receive $245K, of which $35,000 is currently being reflected in this budget model. And the Arts and Music Block Grant, which we were awarded $343,000, we currently have $140,000 planned for this fiscal year. And that was also part of the $468,000 increase in other state revenue that was not budgeted for. On the other local revenue side, we have about $62K higher, and that is a component of prior year funding from the 21-22 school year for lottery, which came in higher than planned, which was good news, higher than planned based on our accrual at the end of the year, as well as additional funding for the state portion of special education. So less from the feds, more from the local government for special education. On the expense side, we have realized savings in certificated salaries, about $37K through October. And I believe that's due to open positions. I think we have a maternity leave, right? Okay. No, am I confusing the schools?
Yeah, no, we did have that, but it's not open positions. I went through it at the finance committee.
Well, that's right. It was budgeted salaries coming in less than
Right.
before. Sorry.
You got a lot of schools you're dealing with.
On the benefit side, each month we've been realizing a little bit of savings in our benefits for the year. Open enrollment came, people chose less expensive plans, and we've realized some savings thus far. On the student supply side, we have a ton of savings, about $55K. The majority of that, and basically all of that, is due to our nutrition program being 100% free for this year. So we are not on the hook to pay for any of the nutrition program costs for this fiscal year, and that's just for this fiscal year. In future years, we are planning on, planning on those expenses unless we're told otherwise. On the operating expense side, we have an increase of 164,000 from budget. And the main driver here is Dr. Jones is estimating what LAUSD could provide us in the form of an over allocation penalty for this fiscal year. So to cover ourselves and have some insurance, we've estimated a similar over allocation penalty for the 22-23 school year as we had in the 21-22 school year. Even with that increase expense, we're looking at a net income for the year of $305K, which is a pretty healthy net income, and much higher than the $27K that we originally board approved. Scrolling down just a little bit there, Dr. Jones, I just wanted to highlight cash for the board. So we ended October with a little over $2 million in the bank. And despite all of these one-time funding sources, as well as new funding sources, I'm forecasting a $1.5 million cash balance as of June 30th with $1 million receivable. Now, I am being very conservative with the timing of these one-time funds, as well as the timing of the hold harmless dollars. So there is a good chance that we will have a higher cash balance at the end of this year. But as of right now, we're taking the more conservative approach. If you scroll through Dr. Jones, we have our notes, the balance sheet, and the actual income statement, as well as the check register. And I did want, after we scroll through this, for the board to have an opportunity to look at the check register and ask any questions if they had any. Please note, once we get to the check register, that it was intentionally filtered per the request of the Finance Committee from the largest to the smallest expense.
Thanks, Ryan. If board members have reviewed it, let's move on to the vote. So all in favor to approve the financials for October 2022? Sam?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Is yes for me. Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome.
Moving on to, I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2022-2023 interim report. The first interim report. Is there a second?
I'll second.
That's Pete. Go ahead, Chris.
So this is a report that is a different way of phrasing what you just looked at and approved. It is how we have to present it for LA Unified, for the county and the state. And the key things that we want to be sure are tied together are that our net income is matching. So Ryan, you want to just kind of guide us through that, and I can scroll where you like.
Or if you could just scroll to the top a little bit more, I just wanted to point out to the board what the different columns represent. So right here is perfect. So column A represents the preliminary budget that's due to LAUSD. Sometimes it's in the end of May, sometimes it's within the first week of June. It's not usually ready. I mean, it's usually not the board approved budget. It's what we have at the time of the due date. Column B is the actual budget that the board approves. Column C shows the actuals from July to October. And column D is the total projection for the year. And if you wanted to look at these numbers on your financial dashboard that we just went through, column A wouldn't be there because again, it's just preliminary numbers. It's not a board approved budget. But what you would see are the numbers from column B, C, and D, showing total revenues, total expenses, and the net income. And we went through this in the finance committee meeting, and we made sure that these numbers tied to the dashboard presentation that you all just approved. And I did want to point out that this, even though it is the October presentation in a different format, it does require a separate action item for LAUSD, because they do want to make sure that boards are aware that these are, the first interim numbers that actually do go to the district. I don't have anything else to add unless someone has a question. I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions from the board? Sam?
No questions.
Pete?
No questions.
Catherine?
No questions.
All right, let's move on to the vote. All in favor to approve the 2022-2023 first interim report? Sam?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Yes, for me as well. Approval, I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2022-2023 budget adjustment as Chris identified earlier in the meeting today. Is there a second?
A second.
It's from Sam. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, because there were so many different pieces that we weren't aware of how it was going to play out back in June. I think it's appropriate that we adjust our budget from now to the remainder of the year with all the known information that we have, which includes, as I said, a lot to the good, but some things not to the good. That main thing, the main driver of that is enrollment and the effects that has on finances. So if you can see across the top, we have, for reference, the 21-22 school year, and the enrollment at that time being 380. The approved budget from June, which we had hoped for 426 students. We are the forecast is what our adjusted budget is what we're recommending. So that's using a 391 student enrollment, and we are also with this and for future years projecting out a 95% ADA number. And we feel that that's appropriate, given that we're still having students out sick, and we're not quarantining whole classes like we were last year and those kind of things, but we still have a lot of kids out sick. We're trying to catch up with it with independent study, but we don't think it's appropriate to go higher than 95% as our ADA number. And then the out years, 23-24 and 24-25, we do see enrollment growth and projection, but it's tapered from what some of the more aggressive numbers that I had given you a year ago. This is it's still expecting growth, and particularly that growth being continued at middle school, as well as eventually we want to see that growth coming in the lower grades as well. So we see 438 as a goal, and then 466 as a goal beyond that. So with that, I'm going to let Ryan just tell a little bit about what some of the the big adjustments. You already mentioned a bunch of them, and I've talked about them in past months, but just anything that stands out in terms of adjustments in this presentation. Ryan?
Well, nothing stands out to me other than a disclaimer that, as enrollment was increasing, I did want to point out that one thing that we didn't increase was the fundraising target. Usually that's kind of a number that is based on the student size population, but we did keep it constant. So that's not something that increased in the future years. Or I'm sorry, Chris, I'm talking in the future. Are you talking about specifically the current year that we're asking the board to approve?
Yes, yeah, the 22-23 forecast.
Yeah, so I guess the main highlights, because this is basically the October financial presentation I just went through. The main thing to point out is this is based off of 391 students. We have had 393 through month 2. So it's possible that we will continue to achieve a positive revenue variance if we continue to maintain those additional students at the ADA rate that we are having. On the revenue side, I did also just want to point out that we accessed about 35,000 of the learning recovery block grant and 135,000 of the arts and music block grant. That arts and music block grant is pending an official plan, and it is possible that when devising that plan, Dr. Jones may want to access more of it or something different. But I just wanted to point out those are dependent on those plans, and they could increase or decrease, but they wouldn't increase or decrease and go away. They would just be shifted to another fiscal year if that change did occur. Nothing else to point out on the expense side other than the estimated Proposition 39 over allocation penalty of 146K. That could be high, lower, or I don't know. That was an estimate, Dr. Jones, right?
Yeah, and that's something we think it was a conservative estimate. So if anything, I think that number would be lower, and so that brings us to the good. I think just to answer your question, Ryan, do I want to spend down more of some of those specialized funds that can last for several years? My answer is no. We're showing a 300,000 net income at the moment, and I think we've budgeted conservatively, so that means it could get even a little better than that. So I don't want to try to dip into other funds that we can kind of hold off and use over the coming years. So that's my basic plan of the stuff that we put in there now. I think we need to spend down some of it, and that's why we went with the arts and music grant, because that's over. We actually have one less year to spend that than the other grant. So I think that's a good one to be starting in on, but we're not dipping into those as much as we would need to if we were facing some kind of a fiscal crunch this year. So we need to be keeping our eyes ahead to future years. So keeping that 300,000 as really the makeup for last year, keeping that in our reserves. Is what I would like to see happen, and most importantly, not spending away one-time money that we have that we can spend in future years. I think it's wise to save that.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions? Pete, Catherine, Sam?
This is Sam. Just a question about, I don't have a question about this year's restatement of the budget, but for next year. So is that the number that you've been using then for the Prop 39 application, the adjusted number we see there?
Yeah, great question. We adjusted it and made sure they matched for these years with what we are projecting out, and in terms of enrollment and money that would come in, but also in terms of number of teachers we need. That's all included in here, that matches to the enrollments that we're projecting.
Thanks.
Pete and Catherine?
No questions, thanks.
No questions.
All right, on to the vote. All in favor to approve the 2022-2023 budget adjustment? Sam,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes,
Catherine?
Yes.
That's a yes for me. I'd like to make a motion to approve the administration of medication policy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
From Pete? Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, this is a policy that I'm recommending. It does two things. We have pieces of this we've had in place with our student and family handbook. But this is a little bit more in depth, and it talks about how we administer medication on campus, what it takes for us to be able to do that. It provides an avenue for self-medication for a student who is able for certain types of medications like an EpiPen or asthma medication. But it gives all the specific details of that. It also provides information about 3 specific emergency responses, and one of those I want to highlight. One is anaphylactic reaction, so that's EpiPens. We've been doing that and following this kind of thing in the past, and we do training at the beginning of the year. The second is response to diabetic emergency. And so this gives us a little more detail of how we would get training and response for that. And the third is something that I think is certainly been in the news and is particularly important, that we look at the possibility of opioid overdose on a campus and the issues that are happening with the result of fentanyl. And this gives us an opportunity to store a fentanyl. What would you call it? That turns it against it and can save a life. And this basically Narcan is the what would be able to be given, and it would allow us we obviously hope this would not happen, but if it did, we would have the ability to provide life-saving work for that student. And so this gives us an entire way to structure that. And that's why we're recommending that the board approve this policy in total.
Chris, quick question about this. Has this been vetted by LAUSD?
It has been vetted by our legal, and it is also LAUSD, interestingly, moved ahead of us on this. So they pushed in a month ago to be able to get their schools to be able to have nasal Narcan available for distribution. And my understanding is that's available now at all schools. And so this is within LAUSD's acceptable policy. In fact, they've already moved forward on it.
Thank you, Chris. Sam, Pete, Catherine, questions, comments?
No other questions. You answered the question I had, which was whether legal had reviewed this or not.
Pete?
I'm just curious, how many cases of fentanyl overdose during school hours at a school in LAUSD actually occurred? Have anybody have any data on that?
There, in the past, well, in this school year, there have been three cases that I'm aware of that took place, two at a similar campus out in the Valley, and that prompted, but the overall, the numbers have increased and have doubled in the past year in terms of countywide.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's not a serious thing. I'm just wondering whether the whatever company produces the NaRQual, whatever that stuff is called, whether they're making making more out of it than the overreaction to minimal cases. You know, we obviously don't have anti-nut poisoning and the things that actually occur a lot on campuses, and yet, you know, because it's in the news, we jump all over this one, which I assume the cost is minimal, and I assume the insurance ramifications are minimal. But you know, those are my only comments.
And I would just share, the cost is minimal, and we think it's a you know, an expense well worth taking. We do, you know, you ask about like nut allergies and those type of things. So the EpiPens, we do provide that same training, and we do provide them on campus because it is more likely and more prevalent.
Thank you, Chris. Katrin, questions, comments?
Following up on what you just said, Chris, you said the EpiPens are already on campus and you already have staff trained on that. So that's not new, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Oh, I was under the impression reading the policy that was also part of a new program.
Yeah, the policy it was, as I said, developed through YMC, and they want to be sure that we're covering the major pieces. We have EpiPens provided by families that are where a student is prone to allergy, but we also, because we do this training, have a general EpiPen that we are able to administer in cases where, you know, someone's having difficulty breathing.
Okay, I understand. The only question I had when I read the policy is if you have sufficient volunteers going through sort of the volunteer system that you propose, accounting for possible absences of teachers or others that may be volunteers.
Yeah, and well, it does require that a person volunteer, and they can choose to not do it, and there can't be any repercussion over that. But we've had a good response with folks in the type of trainings we've done already.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
Thank you, Katrin. All right, then all in favor to approve the administration of medication policy, Sam?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
Thank you, and that's a yes for me. Moving on, I'd like to make a motion to approve the student wellness policy. Is there a second?
I can second.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. So it's policy night. This one is more general, but it is a requirement of that we are as a Title I school, that we do have a student wellness policy. And so we again worked with YMC, put that out there right away for Sam. And we will you know, setting up how we're trying to make our campus a place where healthy activities and healthy eating is encouraged and is kind of a part of the DNA. And so we're going to set this up. The group that we're going to ask to look at this is our parent advisory committee, that they are folks who vet this, and they in fact did take a look at this at the end of last year. And so we needed to bring it forward. We'll have them do reviews of this annually, and we need to relook at the entire policy once every 3 years. So but as I said, it is a definite requirement of Title I, and so we want to be sure that we have this approved and ready to go.
Thank you, Chris. Just a curiosity, is there a way we couldn't have included the medication policy into the wellness policy? Like we needed 2 separate ones?
When we brought it up, they said we have these policies we work from, and they separate them out. So not saying that probably couldn't be done, but it just the way it rolled out.
My suggestion would be just to incorporate them into like I guess, student health and wellness, you know what I mean? Area that if we are going to make an adjustment to it, we make it to the entire document. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we'd need to look at if there were something changed in one, it might affect the other.
Right, exactly. But keep it cohesive, you know what I mean? Like this is about student welfare. And Sam, Catherine, Pete, any comments, questions?
None for me.
None for me.
From me. Oh, sorry.
Catherine, anything else? You good?
I'm good, thanks.
All right. All in favor to approve the student wellness policy? Sam,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
that is ratified. I'd like to make a motion to approve the Charter Life vendor contracts for health benefits. Chris, thank you for providing that in the share. That was interesting. A second
I'll second.
from Pete. Go ahead, Chris.
All right. There we go. So we are in the right up to it in terms of the timing, because we have open enrollment coming up, and but in the executive summary, wanted to basically look at we're talking about being able to offer our employees the same level of service and same programs that we've had in the past. There is an increase, and I apologize if you saw earlier, it was we'd put in the an earlier version, but it's a 4.67% increase, which given inflation, it doesn't seem too out of line. But basically this is continuing forward with Charter Life. We've been very happy with their service. They work very well with us, and are responsive whenever we have issues. So we're recommending moving forward, and we want to be able to get open enrollment happening this week.
Thank you, Chris. I love the executive summary, as I said. Did you do a bid for other vendors for this?
We did not.
Why?
Mostly because we were very happy with what we've been given, and people are happy with the choices that they have. The overall or shifting or changing, I think we'd need to, if we want to do that, we need to start that process in the spring, and really have those things in place for early fall, so that we could make a shift or adjustment.
My suggestion would be put it into the fold for the annual review of the vendor contracts. You know what I mean? 'Cause I know you have a process where you evaluate them, and you give them a grade, and then I am not saying that this isn't the right choice at the time, at this time, but I do understand it's expiring, so I will vote in favor of it right now, but that would be my recommendation. Sam, Pete, Katrin.
Thanks this year. I support, taking a closer look at this for the next year, but I also heard you say, Chris, I just wanted to confirm that the employees are happy with or generally happy with the benefits package that they're offered through this.
Yes, and the reason is there's so many options. There's fairly expensive plans. There's fairly inexpensive plans. We provide 750 now a month towards that, and so people can make choices. Are they just for themselves? Is it they and a spouse? Is it a family? And there's everything from the HMOs to PPOs and the whole in-between marketplace, which is kind of where what's expanding between HMO and PPO. That really is kind of where that market is going.
Thanks.
Pete,
No questions, thanks.
Katrin.
No questions.
All right, then all in favor to approve the Charter Life vendor contract? Sam,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes,
Katrin.
Yes.
That is a yes for me. Moving on to new business. Sam, any new business for upcoming board meetings?
No new business.
Pete,
nothing for me.
Katrin,
No, nothing.
right. Chris, if there is nothing further, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
From Sam. All in favor? Sam,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
That is a yes for me. Well, thank you guys. That was great. Chris, thank you for the just Sam's and all the budget stuff, Ryan. I don't know, Ryan's probably not on anymore, but that was really good and great to see you guys. I'm sorry I was gone last time, but I appreciate all the hard work as always. All right, so I'd like to say the meeting is adjourned at 7:38 p.m.
Okay.